All right, today we're diving into a story that's just full of contradictions, and it's all unfolding in Eastern Europe. We're talking about a nation, Moldova, that's caught between two worlds, a really tough economic downturn on one side, and this incredible burst of new creative energy on the other. And this is all happening while they're chasing this big European dream. So, how on earth can both of these things be true at once? Well, that's what we're here to figure out.
So, here's the central puzzle we're trying to solve. On one hand, you've got the official numbers, and they're not great. The economy is actually shrinking, and poverty is on the rise. But then, and this is the wild part, at the exact same time, a record number of new businesses are popping up. It just doesn't seem to add up, right? So, how is that even possible? What is really going on in Moldova?
Okay, so for anyone who's not exactly sure where we're talking about, this is Moldova. It's a country positioned smack dab in a really crucial spot in Eastern Europe. It's a nation that's really wrestling with its history, trying to shake off the challenges of the past and carve out a new future, looking towards the West. And believe me, where it is on the map, that location is absolutely key to understanding the rest of this story.
All right, let's dive right into this economic paradox. And we're going to start with the tough part, the genuinely worrying news.
So you see the term technical recession? What does that actually mean? Well, it's the official phrase for when an economy shrinks for at least 6 months straight. But Moldova, by early 2025, it had 3 straight quarters of decline. So we're not just talking about a little slowdown here. This is a real, formal contraction. And that's the kind of thing that hits people hard. It affects jobs, it affects incomes, and it affects the whole country's confidence.
But then, you see this. Just as the big picture is looking pretty bleak, entrepreneurship is just exploding. I mean, a 16.5% jump in new businesses in just the first 7 months of the year. That's not a tiny blip on the radar. That is a serious boom. It tells you there's this powerful current of change and optimism running just beneath the surface, something that seems to completely contradict the recession headlines.
That economic strain, it's not just some abstract number on a chart. It has a very, very real human cost. So let's take a look at how this is actually impacting people in Moldova.
And this is the big, stark number. In 2024, the rate of what's called absolute poverty shot up to 33.6%. Now, that's a 2 percentage point jump in just 1 year. And trust me, in a national statistic like this, that is a huge and really worrying leap.
And let's be super clear about what that means. We're not talking about people who can't afford a new phone or a vacation. We're talking about nearly 1 out of every 3 people in the entire country struggling to pay for the absolute basics. Things like food on the table, a roof over their heads, keeping the lights on. For a huge part of the population, just getting by is a daily battle.
And something really important to understand here is that the report this data comes from looks at poverty in a smarter way. It's not just about how much money you have. It's what they call multidimensional poverty. So it also looks at whether people are being deprived of other essential things, like decent healthcare, a good education, or even just having a safe job. It gives you a much richer, more complete picture of what hardship really looks like.
So who is getting hit the hardest by all this? Well, the burden isn't shared equally, not by a long shot. Look at these numbers. For a family with 3 or more kids, the poverty rate is a staggering 58.3%, almost 60%. It's nearly half for people with disabilities. And if you live in a rural area, it's over 42%. It's crystal clear which groups are really bearing the brunt of this crisis.
And you don't have to take my word for it. This is straight from the report itself. They call it a dramatic reality, and they say it's been caused by one shock after another. The key takeaway here is that this isn't just some temporary blip. It's a deep, systemic problem that has left a third of the country below the absolute poverty line.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got a recession, we've got widespread poverty, and yet we have this boom in new businesses. So how do you make sense of that? How do you square that circle? Well, it looks like the answer is in this massive economic shift that's happening, a transition where the old failing systems are making way for something new.
And this right here, this is really the heart of the story. You can think of Moldova as being caught between 2 different economic engines. The old engine, the one that ran on low-cost labor and agriculture, it's just running out of gas. It's exhausted. But a new engine is just starting to roar to life. This one's fueled by entrepreneurs, by tech, by services, and it's all pointed towards integrating with Europe. So that pain we're seeing, the recession and poverty, that's the old engine sputtering out. And the hope, that business boom, That's the sound of the new one firing up.
And if you want to see what that old engine running out of steam looks like in numbers, here it is. In 2024, the entire industrial sector's share of the economy dropped to a historic low of just 8.7%. That traditional powerhouse of the economy has basically ground to a halt.
But just as that old engine is sputtering, these new ones are absolutely roaring to life. The reports are really clear on this. Sectors like IT, services, and even construction aren't just getting by, they're actually growing, and with some serious resilience. This growth is probably being fueled by a really skilled workforce and those ever closer ties to Europe. This is where that incredible 16.5% jump in new businesses is coming from.
Now, this massive shift, it isn't just happening randomly, no. It's being pushed forward by a huge national goal, joining the European Union. And that ambition, that dream, is forcing the entire country to make these really deep, fundamental changes.
And here's the thing. To even have a shot at joining the EU, Moldova has to basically overhaul how the country runs. It all comes down to these three massive pillars. First, you've got to fight corruption, head on. Second, you have to modernize your entire financial system so it can actually talk to Europe's. And third, you have to strengthen all your government institutions, making them way more transparent and a lot more effective. And you can actually see how they're doing by looking at their international rankings. It's kind of like their global report card, and the grades are getting better. You see clear improvements in things like corruption perception and economic freedom. And check this out, they've made a massive leap on gender equality. They're now ranked 7th in the world. That's incredible. Now, it's not all perfect. It does show some challenges, like a drop in innovation. So it's a mixed bag for sure, but the overall trend is definitely pointing up.
And listen, these reforms aren't just empty promises on paper. Here's a real, tangible win that happened just this year. Moldova joined something called SEPA. Now, I know, single euro payments area sounds super technical and boring, but trust me, this is a huge deal. What it means is that sending money between Moldova and any country in the EU is now just as easy, fast, and cheap as sending it from, say, France to Germany. It's a massive practical step towards literally stitching Moldova's economy into the fabric of Europe.
So when you put it all together, you're left with this incredibly fascinating, really high-stakes situation. Moldova is a country standing right at a crossroads, trying to balance the very real pain of today with the enormous promise of tomorrow.
And all of this leads us to the big, final question. You've got this country that's being powered by this new wave of entrepreneurial spirit and this powerful vision for a European future. But at the same time, it's being held back, weighed down by the heavy burdens of that old, failing economy and the poverty it created. So the question is, can the new ambition overcome the old burdens? Honestly, the answer to that is going to define Moldova's future for generations to come.